Report story. Hey guys, this is Anime Fan 299,110 coming to you with another chapter to Family Matters. The idea for this chapter actually came from Tom's 343, and after talking things over with him, I was able to get a good solid plot behind this story. Once again, I do not own Boku no Hero Academia, its characters, or its locations. They are all owned by Kohei Horikoshi, Jump Comics, and Funimation. Come on, Eri. Concentrate. You can do it, sweetie. Just focus. NHH. Eri grunted as she scrunched her face in concentration as she held the hand of the injured student. A bright aura of white light seemed to surround the area of the student's injury. The aura only lasted for a few seconds, however, as the light surrounding Eri's horn died. The little girl sighed in defeat as she saw that she made very little progress. She, Midoriya, Uraraka were in the infirmary with Aizawa and Recovery Girl. When Midoriya was offered the opportunity to look after Eri, he was also informed that she would have to partake in quirk training. Due to the fact that her quirk was so unique and could be used as support, it was determined that Recovery Girl would be the one to train her, with Midoriya and another student for support. Initially, the other student was meant to be Mirio, but when he noticed the connection Eri shared with Uraraka, he stepped down and allowed the gravity user to take his place. Nezu even assigned Aizawa to the training exercises, seeing as how he was the only one who could nullify Eri's quirk should anything go wrong. There was one problem, however. No matter how hard she tried, Eri couldn't seem to fully use her quirk for more than 5 seconds, and even then, it had no lasting effects. For the first month of training, the two teachers and students didn't see this as a problem since she had used up a lot of power during the rescue mission. However, by the second month, things got complicated. According to Aizawa, the power level of her quirk should have been enough to heal small wounds completely regardless of the state of her horn. Even Uraraka and Midoriya had to admit that they were both a little worried that Eri would never know how to use her quirk properly. You're all set to leave, Aizawa said to the student as soon as she was healed by one of Recovery Girl's kisses. The student only nodded as she left the infirmary. I'm sorry, Eri muttered dejectedly as she glancing downward. It's all right, sweetie, Recovery Girl said as she placed a hand on the little girl's shoulder and gave her a small smile. We just need to find out something to help amplify your quirk, that's all. She then turned to Midoriya and Uraraka and asked, You two wouldn't know anything that might help her, would you? We've tried almost everything, Uraraka said sadly. Persuasion, encouraging her to be calm, concentration, none of which work. As Uraraka, Recovery Girl, and Aizawa talked, Midoriya drowned them out and closed his eyes as he tried to think back to when he faced off against Overhaul. There had to be something off during that fight that might help them here and now. As his mind raced throughout the fight, he suddenly remembered something about Eri and her quirk. What if we've been looking at this whole thing the wrong way? Midoriya asked. He then turned his head to see the 4 sets of eyes staring back at him with confusion. During my fight with Overhaul, I called Eri's quirk a blessing and she seemed happy by it when she fused her quirk with mine. There were almost no repercussions since she seemed to have control of her quirk. But every time I got injured, she must have felt guilty thinking that she caused me to be in pain. So much so that by the time Overhaul was put down, Eri lost control of her quirk. Is this true, sweetie? Uraraka asked as she glanced down at the little girl. Were you feeling guilty thinking that you were hurting Papa? Why, yes. Eri admitted shamefully. Promoted stories. You'll also like. One shots BNH8 discontinued. Stop request. 71.4K 476 stop requesting. I will block you. Most of these are sad or have serious themes because I like reading and writing angst. I do not own BNHA or any of its characters. My Hero Academia. From the ground up 81.1K 1.8K alternate. Universe where Izuku Midoriya and Ochako Uraraka grew up together. Got to fourth in the childhood friends tag. Future hero Izu Mina 30.9K 423 characters. Aren't mine Izumina is the best ship ever. Takes place after the school trip. Also, 1A is already living in dorms. Disclaimer. The story is not same as in M. Who is that? 6.1K 145 in quad. A. New student has arrived in school. She seems familiar to most of the students, especially one. And quad. There will be ships in this fanfic. Some of them include Control Your Reality, Katsuki Bakugo 73.7K 4.5K book. Two of the reality series, and quad. I think a true hero is someone who puts themselves in front of danger to protect someone else. They don't give up, and they're willy. I am here for you Izuocha 251K 4.7K characters. And settings all owned and created by Kohei Horikoshi. This is a non-profit fanfiction edited by Nimish Wenkade and Kaori 112 Arc 1. Ochako is worried Abu. Quirkless Police O complete 75.7K 1.7K This was my first fanfic. It's shitty, be careful. Izuku Midoriya, quirkless police officer. After his interaction with All Might, he gave up on being a hero. He decide. What exactly are you getting at, Midoriya? Recovery girl asked curiously. What if her quirk is amplified by her emotions? Midoriya explained as the four people surrounding him looked on in confusion. I know it seems a little bit ridiculous and a bit far-fetched, but what if it were actually based on that? What if negative emotions caused her to have little to no control over her quirk while positive emotions caused her to not only have better control over it, but also make her quirk stronger? What do you think, Eraser? Recovery girl asked as she looked up at the homeroom teacher. At this point, might as well test that theory. Aizawa said with a shrug. All right then, Midoriya, recovery girl said as she directed her attention toward the boy. We'll try it out. However, I'm not sure what would cause Eri to become happy or be positive. I may have an idea on that part. Uraraka chimed in before looking at the little girl and saying, Eri, try thinking of some happy memories and use them while also concentrating on the person's injury. Think you can do that? I'll try, Eri said nervously. Very well, then, recovery girl said with a smile. I'll call the next patient while you think of something that makes you happy. As recovery girl made her way to the door to the infirmary, Eri shut her eyes in concentration. She had to think of a really happy memory in order to make sure that Midoriya's theory was correct. The problem was that there were so few to choose from. Seeing as how she had spent most of her life trapped in a darkened place, she only could think of the times she was with her mama and papa and the rest of class 1A. Christmas, her birthday, Halloween, so many memories flooded her mind. Suddenly, she remembered one good memory that probably stood out from all the rest. Are you ready? Recovery Girl asked as her voice snapped airy from her thoughts. She then opened her eyes to see another student, this time a male, lying on the cot with a purple bruise on his arm. Trying her best to focus on the memory, Ari nodded silently. Very well then, Recovery Girl said, let's begin. As Ari placed her hands gently on the student's arm, she closed her eyes and tried to focus on both the memory and the will to use her quirk. As she tried to concentrate, she felt a surge of power on top of her head where her horn was located. The surge felt odd. In the past, it felt cold and empty. This time, however, it felt warm and comforting, like being wrapped in a cozy blanket or receiving a hug from her parents. Since her eyes were closed, Ari couldn't see the look of awe and amusement on her mama and papa's faces. Even Aizawa's eyes widened slightly at the sight before him. Not only did the aura emitted by Eri last longer than a few seconds, but it also covered the entire body of the injured student as well in the familiar bright aura. Recovery Girl could only smile as the small bruise on the student's leg slowly changed from purple to its original color. Once she had felt that the wound had healed properly, she turned to Eri and said, Eri, that's enough. Concentrate on relaxing. Hearing the elderly woman's words, Eri mentally shook the memory away and breathed deeply so as to relax. Soon, the warm feeling from the surge of power died down. Eri opened her eyes to see the smiling faces of Uraraka, Midoriya, and Recovery Girl and asked, what happened? See for yourself. Recovery Girl said as she pointed at the student's leg. Eri glanced over and her eyes widened as she noticed that the bruise was gone. You did that, dear. Guess Midoriya's theory turned out to be right after all. Eri couldn't believe it. After all those months of hardship, she was finally able to amplify and gain some control of her quirk. Can we try another? She asked with a huge smile on her face. Please, 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 please. I think that's enough for today. Recovery Girl said with a chuckle. The main focus of today was just trying to find anything that could help you gain some control of your quirk. Now that we know what it is, the real training can begin. And as for you two, she added as she glanced up at both Uraraka and Midoriya, now that we know what actually works, it'll be the job of you two and your classmates to give her some happy memories in order to help her with her quirk. I don't think that'll be a problem, Recovery Girl. Midoriya said with a smile, to which she returned. Well, thanks again, Recovery Girl. He added as he and Uraraka each took Eri by the hand and followed Aizawa to the doors of the infirmary. As she watched them leave, Recovery Girl couldn't help but smile warmly. That little girl is truly something. She thought in amusement. She's lucky to be around so many people who love and care about her. Eri, meanwhile, continued to walk with Uraraka, Midoriya, and Aizawa down the halls until they reached the staff lounge. Well, I better get back to work. Aizawa said unenthusiastically. Just be sure you two get your assignments done for Mon. Yo, Eraser. What's up? The sound of a feminine voice caused Aizawa to suddenly stiffen in fear. Sighing in annoyance, he, along with Uraraka, Midoriya, and Eri, turned to see a young woman in her late 20s with green hair that was covered by an orange bandana. She was wearing baggy green and orange pinstriped shorts, a sleeveless black top, a waistband adorned with smiley face pins, and had orange combat gloves with metal plates around the wrists on her hands. What was most notable about her was the huge smile she had on her face as she approached. Oh God, Aizawa thought tiredly. My greatest nuisance. Ms. Joke. Midoriya exclaimed excitedly as the pro-hero stopped right in front of them. What are you doing here? Present Mike. Ms. Joke said simply. He needed some advice on how to deal with the provisional license exam for the new second year's new semester. So how have you two been? Eraser's not giving you a hard time, is he? We've actually been doing well. Uraraka said with a smile. I've been able to last a few minutes longer without losing my lunch and Deku's gotten stronger in his fighting abilities. Good to hear, Ms. Joke said before she glanced down at Eri. And who is this? She asked. This is Eri, Midoriya said. She's been living with us and the rest of Class 1A. We just got back from Quirk training for her. He then knelt down and said, Go on Eri, say hi. Hi. Eri stated nervously. Nice to meet ya, kid. Ms. Joke exclaimed. Name's Fukukado Emi, otherwise known as the pro-hero Ms. Joke. My quirk allows my targets to break out into uncontrollable laughter. It thus causes me to. As Ms. Joke continued to explain her quirk, Eri looked from her to Aizawa and then back again. Ms. Joke, she asked abruptly. How do you know Mr. Zawa? Oh, Ms. Joke said in surprise before her smile grew. I used to work at an office near his and we become close to one another. She then paused as her eyes turned a dreamy gaze and her cheeks turned a rosy pink. You might say we were meant to be star-crossed. We never were and never will be. Aizawa said in annoyance. God, I miss that sense of humor of yours. Ms. Joke exclaimed as she reverted back to her normal self. Oh, Eri said simply. After a few seconds, she then asked, Are you two a couple? Her question received mixed reactions from the four people around her. Aizawa stiffened more at her words, while Midoriya and Uraraka were torn between worrying about what Aizawa might say and laughing out loud at Eri's question. Ms. Joke, on the other hand, was beside herself. Biwahahahaha. She laughed as she clutched her stomach and tears ran down her face. Man, I like this kid already. It took her a good minute before she calmed down and wiped the tears from her eyes. Unfortunately not, kid, she said casually. I've tried to ask him out, but he still plays hard to get. Speaking of which, she added as she turned her attention toward Aizawa. What do ya say, Eraser? How about a date for the kid sake? No. Ha 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 ha. See what I mean? Ms. Joke said as she laughed once again. So what kind of quirk training were ya doing? She then asked Eri. Oh, I was with Recovery Girl with healing people. Eri said simply before her face saddened a bit. I know it's not a really strong or cool quirk like Papa's or Mama's, but. Before she could finish her sentence, however, Eri felt a gloved hand on top of her head. She glanced slightly upward to see Ms. Joke crouching down and smiling warmly at her. Listen, Ms. Joke said softly, I know that healing may not be the strongest quirk ever. But it still helps people feel better and get better. And personally, I think it's a pretty awesome quirk to have. And you want to know something else? She asked, her smile widening as Eri leaned in with anticipation. I know that no matter what you end up doing with your quirk, you're gonna be a great hero to somebody. Eri couldn't help but smile at the woman's kind words as she nodded her head in appreciation. Well, I better get going. Ms. Joke said as she stood up and looked at her phone. The meeting's gonna start soon. See you kids later. Bye. Uraraka and Midoriya said while Eri waved and said, "Bye, Ms. Joke." "See ya, Eraser," Ms. Joke said as she walked down the hall. "Don't forget about our date." "There's no date," Aizawa said. "Ha ha ha. Such a kidder." The laughter user exclaimed as she walked out of sight. Aizawa sighed before saying, "I swear someone put her on this earth to punish me for something I did when I was younger." "I like her," Eri said simply as she smiled. When Aizawa shot a glare at her, Midoriya and Uraraka panicked. "So'll see on Monday, by Mr. Aizawa." They both exclaimed loudly as they ran off with Eri in tow. Once they made sure they were safe, both students knelt down to catch their breaths. "Maybe, sweetie," Midoriya said while breathing slowly, "it'll be best not to talk about relationships with Mr. Aizawa." "Okay, sorry, Papa," Eri said. "It's all right, sweetie," Uraraka said as she and Midoriya caught their breaths and stood. "By the way, can we ask you something?" "What?" Eri asked curiously. "What memory did you use to amplify your quirk?" Eri only smiled at the question and said, "Oh, it was the day when I started living with you and Papa." Midoriya and Uraraka could only smile at the little girl's response and, taking a hand each, lead the little girl back to Alliance Heights. And with that, another chapter of Family Matters has concluded. Now I know this chapter was considerably shorter than the previous one, but after that length, could you blame me? I would also like to point out that we have just about reached the 1-year anniversary mark on this great story. So I would like to wholeheartedly thank Kohei Horikoshi for creating this franchise, my editors for making sure my content is grammatically correct, and of course my fans who have followed, favorited, and or reviewed this story throughout the year. This story wouldn't be here without any of you. I will be taking the rest of the month off from writing this story so that I can continue working on my side projects. Come February, I will start writing a new chapter. Kudos to Nirvana, my beta reader, and the Izuocha Discord server member Celebi Stan for editing this chapter. Until then, this is Anime Fan 299,110 encouraging you all to go beyond. Plus, Ultra, where stories live. Discover now.